Twitch, so maybe this will be not working. I don't know. Hi everyone, this is going to be a Dark Souls Let's Play. I have Emlyn here, who is interested in connecting Dark Souls to an unexpected media source. Do you want to talk about that?
I'm Emlyn, and I want to explain how I recognized Saint Seiya in Dark Souls. How the stories seem to line up in certain points, and how a lot of references are made throughout the story to how Saints develops.
And I am Sybil. I'm inclined to see Dark Souls as being extremely referential. I don't have any knowledge of Saint Seiya, so this is new to me. But I have a whole set of other references that I'm building up a theory around, and so investigating other elements of this is useful to me. I think Dark Souls is an intensely referential game, and there's a reason for that. That it's not obvious, not even fully known quite yet, but I suppose you probably think it's sort of just, someone, Miyazaki or someone being a big fan of Saint Seiya. That would be sort of your theory for why Seiya shows up so often, yeah?
Probably, yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My interpretation is quite a bit crazier. I like theories that cause frenzy, so I won't talk about it quite yet. We'll just focus on Saint Seiya for the moment. Are we ready to start the opening?
Build to it.
Yeah. Are we ready to start the opening sequence?
Yes.
All right. I think we're going to be quiet during it. I should also make sure that I turn down the volume some, because the opening sequence does not seem to be volume controlled in the same way. All right. It might be quieter for a bit. We'll see how it goes.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons. But then there was fire, and with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. Then from the dark they came and found the souls of lords within the flame. Nito, the first of the dead. The Witch of Izalith and her daughters of Chaos. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, and his faithful knights. And the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. With the strength of lords, they challenged the dragons. Gwyn's mighty gods peeled apart their stone skins. Witches weaved great firestorms. Nito unleashed a miasma of death and disease. And Seath the Scaleless betrayed his own, and the dragons were no more. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. Even now, there are only embers, and man sees not light, but only endless nights. And amongst the living are seen carriers of the accursed dark side. Yes, indeed. The dark sign brands the undead. And in this land, the undead are corralled and led to the north. Where they are locked away to await the end of the world. This is your fate.
Okay, so that ends the intro video. There's really so many things you could say about it, but I think you wanted to instead start by talking about how this intro starts connecting to one of the most recent Saint Seiya media, Lost Canvas, right?
When we start off in this jail cell, the way we are sitting there against the wall just waiting is very reminiscent of a shot that we receive of Tenma waiting in his jail cell as he
Alright.
was locked away to not go on adventures as well. And then when Oscar comes to save us,
There is the shot that we were talking about.
Oscar comes to save us.
Hmm?
It is very reminiscent of how the unicorn comes to save Tenma in the jail cell.
Okay. And of course, there's going to be some structural differences because of even if you were trying to do this, you wouldn't necessarily be able to make it frame by frame. In part because of technical restrictions, in part because of having you don't want to have your media obviously copying off of something else, even if you're just referencing it internally for some separate reason. But there has to be a degree of no, I did this before, a degree of suspension of disbelief when there's not an exact frame for frame recreation. We're looking more for like broader symbolic patterns. We talked a little bit, you and I, about this sacked hollow. There's a video, I believe, on the YouTubes that refers to it, and I like it being a hint. I don't know that I have much exciting to say about it. Yeah.
It's an interesting theory. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it actually leads anywhere. But we could also now talk about the actual intro and the gods that are not there set up within it.
Okay.
So, like, where I think Gwyn is a direct reference to Zeus in the intro, Islif is referencing Nyx via the Daughter of Chaos reference.
So we're talking about Greek gods specifically here, not Saint Seiya necessarily.
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying. Like, I don't know that Zeus is a Saint Seiya character.
He doesn't show up in it. He's referenced a few times, but he doesn't actually show up in it.
There's a demon
But
there.
like
We skipped it, sorry.
with the lightning bolts, it seems very directly showing us Zeus in his wars with the Titans. I could say.
And
Seth betraying his own would be a reference to those Titans with the Prometheus setup, where he betrayed the Titans and helped the gods. And then Hades would be Nito as the first of the dead.
But there is a distinct lack of Zeus within Saint Seiya. What do you make of that?
He's sort of replaced by Odin for a couple of sections, and they were going to do a Zeus story, but sadly the creator of Saint Seiya died before he could finish that story.
And that's
So we only have like slight details about what he wanted to do, and not full on. This is the entire thing.
And that is the anime creator. Did we ever really confirm that for sure?
The manga creator himself, the one who wrote the story originally, he passed away in 2014, I think.
Okay. So we have Oscar.
Oh, you. You're no hollow. Thank goodness. I'm done for, I'm afraid. I'll die soon, then lose my sanity. I wish to ask something of you. You and I, we're both undead. Hear me out, will you? Regrettably, I have failed in my mission, but perhaps you can keep the torch lit. There is an old saying in my family. Thou who art undead art chosen. In thine exodus from the undead asylum, maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. When thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know. Well, now you know. And I can die with hope in my heart. Oh, one more thing. Here, take this. An Estus flask. An undead favorite. Oh, and this. Now I must bid farewell. I would hate to harm you after death. So go now, and thank you.
Interesting already in that he just gave us our first objective at the end of the list of events that he brought up, to immediately check what we learn when we've done all those things, because it seems to be rather important. And then he gives us the most valuable item we'll receive throughout the entire game in the form of the Estus flask.
That's Sunny D. Now, you want to make the point that he's not merely or even necessarily referring to the linking of the flame quest that we eventually have. You think that
Yes.
he's more focused on the DLC of this game.
Yes. I think he's not actually, when he brings us to the you will learn the fate of the undead, I don't think he's referring to us learning about how the flame is fading and how we need to go link it. I think he's actually referring to what happened in Olasil.
And in that
As that is
particular case,
where I think the undead originated, at least this section of these
Souls.
undead. Yes. There might have been undead before, but the ones that we are experiencing now, the world has to deal with now, those were probably created from what happened in Ulasil. But we'll get to that with Ulasil.
It is kind of interesting. I just want to talk about, like, from a design perspective. This boss has such a large belly, in part as to give us a physical place so we can't go through the legs. If you remember in Dark Souls 2, the early boss that we fight, the last giant, you can kind of trivialize a huge portion of that fight by just going right through his legs. And they, in this particular context, give the boss this huge bulbous midsection in order to prevent that strategy from working.
Yeah.
You can also see some of the early elements of boss design in this, with the attacks that are the fly up attack to make the boss immune, and then to push you away to sort of reset the fight, and some of his moves that will sweep to his sides to prevent you from just circle strafing around him. One of the struggles I think they had probably early on was dealing with huge bosses not having the same kind of turn radius that players have, and trying to find ways that bosses could bypass that. We will be nearing the end of Undead Asylum here.
Where we will fly aircrow to Lordran.
I found it really interesting that the original design had this Raven ride show up in the Painted World rather than here, or alternatively in addition to here.
Yes. Originally, the location from the Painted World was going to be part of the normal world, so.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually one of the most fascinating things going through the Design Works interview for Dark Souls 1. They talk about the Painted World being their first prototype map, but then they also talk about the upcoming Undead Burg being the first map that they made, which to me is not obviously logically functional. The prototype map would typically be the first map made. So why was this other map made prior to the prototype?
That's a good question.
All right, so I'm going to be doing something really, really stupid because I have a theme for this run.
Stupid or genius.
Well, if I could pull it off, I really like the weapon. If I can't pull it off, then we'll just be talking about things for a bit. In the meanwhile, we've got our crestfallen fellow.
You must be a new arrival. Let me guess. Fate of the undead, right? Well, you're not the first. But there's no salvation here. You'd have done better to rot in the undead asylum. But too late now. Well, since you're here, let me help you out. There are, actually, 2 bells of awakening. One's up above in the Undead Church. The other is far, far below, in the ruins at the base of Blight Town. Ring them both, and something happens. Brilliant, right? Not much to go on. But I have a feeling that won't stop you. So, off you go. It is why you came, isn't it? To this accursed land of the undead?
So he immediately makes it clear that the undead legend has spread far and wide, and that it's not just one family saying that we're dealing with.
We also have Anastasia here. Not a lot we can do. She cannot talk to us, and we can't really accomplish much by trying to talk to her. We don't have any items that allow us to do it, so with that, we'll see if I can pull off what I want to pull off. One thing that I can't remember is where the binoculars are. I know that they're in
All the way at the end.
all the way at the end.
All the way at the end of the graveyard, in the left corner, at the edge of the cliff.
Because that's a useful item to have sometimes when you want to look at something really far away and discuss its relevance to the plot. So I should probably grab that if I can. It's this way, correct?
Yes. Next to the giant tombstone, go. There you can see it.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember where the binoculars are in Dark Souls 2, but the other games tend to put it pretty early, with I think Bloodborne being the one that comes the latest. Since you have to get past Gascoigne to even get it in Bloodborne.
Can't remember either where they are into.
It's also kind of weird that 2 is an offhand or a main hand rather than an item.
Yes.
That always throws me when I have to go back and do recordings.
That was probably them trying to counter people zooming in with magic.
Hmm. All right. Lovely. Less than ideal. Yeah, I want a particular weapon, and I'm going to try to get it. So this is going okay.
So far?
Yeah, no fire damage, and as long as he doesn't... Yeah. You have, my understanding, a bit of a... Oh, that rock. Bit of a safe spot here. Hopefully. Maybe it's further in.
You got the heal off.
Alright, that's probably good enough. This
Wait.
stretch shouldn't be too bad. If I, Oh, this
Get
stretch is
lucky, but-
gone. Yeah, that was unfortunate. The rock really threw off my timing.
Well, you don't have to open the door again, so now you can run through without them
Yeah.
immediately being up.
Okay, so what other things should we talk about in preparation for Undead Burg? I know that there's one thing I want to talk about while we're there that is not, I think super relevant to the Saint Seiya stuff, but it's a part that I really like. You're focusing, I think, on the Taurus demon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
One other thing that I would mention is that the beginning of Dark Souls with the prisoner jail, a lot of that architectural motif is repeated in Bloodborne in the place where we find it's in Hemwick Charnel Lane, the place where we find the tool that allows us to use Hunter's Marks, not Hunter's Marks, the Rune Workshop tool. And I think that there's an interesting comparison there to be made of the idea of the Rune Workshop tool being a way to manufacture golems by putting commands on the golems as a branding device. And when you think about the entirety of Dark Souls, we're sort of, as players, being turned into golems. We are told about the Bells of Awakening. We're told about the Undead curse. We're given keys. They're basically giving us the idea of commands. And, oh no. Those commands, that would have been pretty bad. Those commands propel us to go forward.
Yes.
The idea of game design as being influencing the players to become the golems of the game master is a sort of thematic element that I find really, really intriguing within the Souls series.
Yeah. It
Alright.
could also that is a little carryover from Saints, where the Saints become Athena's knights, so they never really know what they're doing. They're just doing the best they can, trying to move forward, trying to protect her.
Oh
no!
no! I'm used to a different Dark Souls where the jump command would not have come out there. That had not happened when I was trying this earlier, which also every time I did this previously, that particular necromancer was not on the bridge. I've noticed that other people have run into that where his position is inconsistent, and I wonder why that is.
He seems to move around. Either he's in the room after the bridge, or he's on the bridge, and I also don't know why he'd alternate between them.
I wonder if it's random, or if it's something that the player does that shifts his location in some way that isn't obvious why. It would have to be pretty... I don't really know. It might not be
that we
anything
walk
terribly...
into his aggro range?
Yeah, something like that. And just your pathing would aggro him early and then cause him to do something different. That's a theory, but I have no clue.
Yeah. Because,
Hopefully.
when you reach the end of this path and you go across the bridge, technically you're right above him.
Yeah, it could be the case that. Oh man.
Being dicks.
I keep getting stuck on parts of the ground that I don't expect to have collision. It's something that I think is tougher to deal with in Dark Souls 1 than in the later games. There's a lot more clarity as to what to expect as they go on, because a part of that is just having years of experience under their belts. And
And a stronger engine.
yeah,
This character still feels like he's like glued to the floor.
I think there's really something to be said about the way the Dark Souls series, it refines itself over time. I'm sure that people will say that they think that like Dark Souls 1 is their favorite or Dark Souls 2 is their favorite, and that's fine. Having a favorite is fine, but at the same time, we have favorites because of personal reasons, but we can also reflect that even the ones that aren't our favorite can some have, technical improvements that are important. They're not just like merely like, quality of life things. One of the reports online is that the basic Lothric Knights in Dark Souls 3 have AI that is, in my opinion, just straight up better than every Dark Souls 1 boss. It's really incredible the amount of time that they get to put into just a, single repeating regular enemy. And part of that is because, they can basically strip Dark Souls 1 bosses and use some of their movesets / animations to fill in now normal enemy abilities. There's a good degree of efficiency in operating like that. Oh, all right. Maybe this isn't to be right now. It went so much better earlier, and we're holding things up. So I will just come back and do this later. And we'll just longsword the stretch.
Well,
unfortunate.
So we leave the fire lake for
Yep.
the aqueducts.
All right. It's always interesting to me that these particular hollows guarding the town have sort of two different sets of armor that kind of imply a degree of a difference in their the quality of their equipment. In one context, you could see it as kind of like a commander versus a commander versus the sort of grunt troops. The one that we fought was using mostly metal armor, while these are just more leather armor with blunter weapons. I think broadly speaking, a sword is going. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. A sword is going to.
A sword is going to be harder to craft properly than an axe, and like some of the axe ones feel like they're. I suppose that's not entirely true, but within Dark Souls, there's kind of like a refinement of weapon quality that you can see in various enemies. Like the Demon Great Machete that we get from the Copper Demon is very much implied to be shoddy workmanship. It doesn't have a very good crafting style. It's kind of something that would be mass manufactured. Anyway.
Like the orcs in Lord of the Rings, where they have more sort of mass production swords and stuff, and they're all really simplistic.
Yeah. And you can
just
actually
pieces of steel.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that dynamic much more elaborately in Dark Souls 3. The troops on the Lothric wall, some of them are described as deserters, and they have like extremely shoddy weaponry and they're not really very good at using it. The axe users in that game are the clumsiest things that you can basically punish with no worry whatsoever. Whereas the Lothric Knights are extremely well equipped. They have full metal armor and they're well trained. It's an interesting dichotomy that they set up in that game that is kind of mirrored in this game to a lesser extent. One of the other interesting things about this Undead Burg design is a lot of times this feels like it's a regular town that has been retrofitted into a combat zone. A lot of the wood paneling that they add feels impromptu within the context of the world itself. Like they're invading something and entering against the will of the people who actually lived here. Rubbish is a fascinating item that I don't have a lot to say about. Do you have anything to add?
Not really. For the moment.
Okay. So
New Lando, Undead Burg seems to be like built half in combat of the mountain.
So one of the things that has been brought to my attention that's really interesting to me is that these wall segments are within the constructs of castles used to hide your archers. Your archers will like hide behind the solid part and then shoot through it. But these are obviously way too small for an archer that would be our height. They have a technical name, and I don't honestly remember it offhand, despite the fact having written a lot about it. Which I should be able to remember, but I'm not.
I know the term as well, and I'm blanking as well.
Yeah, and when I came into Dark Souls, I didn't really think about the size of it because I was used to like playing Mario, where you see these things and they're meant to like symbolize a castle, and the size of them in Mario doesn't matter because they're purely a background ornament. But one of the most fascinating things about this is that they're inappropriately sized for us right now, and that changes as we go through things like this fog gate. Once we go through the fog gate, and we'll have a bit of a jump scare coming up.
All of a sudden, the wall is higher.
The wall is higher here. And up here we have a particular enemy using it as it would you would normally use it, despite the fact that the enemy is too small to really use it the enemy is too large to use it functionally. Like if you were an archer kiting here and you're the enemy's height, it wouldn't work, but they're still attempting to use it, which indicates that it's something that the designers of the game thought about, the actual purpose for that particular device, which then makes it really fascinating that it changes over time. The other thing that I did want to bring about Undead Burg is how linear this place is. It is an extremely linear portion of game, with a couple different side passages like this that don't generally lead too much other than somehow eventually looping back to the main path. There's a degree of primitiveness to the design, which is what makes it extra funny to me that it's described as being the first map, while Painted World is the prototype map. The Painted World, from like a design evolutionary perspective, is actually a really elaborate zone. It is one of the few parts of Dark Souls 1 that has like a strong hub spoke setup that you eventually see in places like Central Yharnam and Bloodborne. That makes it really strange that it's described as the prototype, and then this is not. This feels much more prototype to me. I've been inclined to wonder if maybe this area... I forgot to go get that. Well, it's not important.
Humanity, so it's...
Yeah. I'm inclined to wonder if maybe this map was something that they had left over from a previous project and therefore the oldest one. Like if this were something that were cut from Demon Souls and they had the sort of structure of the world, so they just reskinned it within the Dark Souls 1 engine. I don't know if that would be 100%
That would
kosher, but yeah, what you're
that
saying?
would explain the this is not the prototype map, but it is the first map thing.
It would. And the other interesting thing is that when they talk about like maps in Dark Souls 1, the DesignWorks interview, they're very much, they always give credit to like the person who owns that particular area. They describe the process as having a designer and a 3D artist working in tandem for every area. This one doesn't follow that pattern, and they mentioned that it's a 3D artist who did. I don't think they mentioned that as a 3D artist, but they mentioned no names other than to say it was a very specific person who chose the details of it down to the very switch location. And it's bizarre to me that they don't credit that person, which is something that would make much more sense if the person they were crediting was someone who only worked on Demon Souls and therefore could not be credited in the same way.
Yep.
I prefer to focus on thinking of these things from a perspective of what you would have to do from a design perspective to make these games happen. I think that it's almost like an archaeological study of game design, what's going on in Dark Souls.
Judging from how we get the lore, he is interested in archaeology, or the team that developed this game is very much interested in it.
Yeah, and it's really, really well done. But I think it's also talking about, in many cases, the game design process itself, because my theory on that is elaborate. I'm not going to get into it right now. But I think there's a meta element to these games, a self-awareness to their design that is evident in the sort of implications of a lot of the choices and item descriptions. And treating it as like an archaeological study, it's deeply fascinating because there's like a culture that went into making these games, and a culture that was influenced by media around them, potentially Saint Seiya, potentially a whole lot of other stuff. How did all of that happen is something that I genuinely want to know. So we're nearing the Taurus demon. Would you want to show the slides before the fight or after?
We'll do it after the fight. I think
Okay.
that's best.
This door will be locked. I didn't talk to the merchant, which is fine.
Yeah, he just gets the best items of the repair box so that you can always repair your gear.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have the shortcut back there available shortly. I think I'll take this slow.
Time.
I'm sure there's a speedrun strat, but we have plenty to talk about, and rather than dying and then having to go back. Also, the more equipped soldiers are the only ones who also have Estus flasks, which is an interesting sort of discrepancy between the two. Anyway, at this point, we're finally getting to crenellations. They're called crenellations. We're finally getting the crenellations that would be high enough to protect someone our size. And as we gradually go through the zone, the crenellation size increases. And that is one of those crazy design choices that to me implies that this game is a lot more frenzy-inducing than most people take at first glance. We could fight the Black Knight.
But maybe depends if you really want to.
I don't really want to. We want to focus
And
on
we'll
getting
come
to the
back for
Taurus.
them later.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, this leads to Havel's Tower and
Havel.
then eventually
Yes.
Dark Group.
Yes. And there is a crystal lizard in the boxes.
Which
I think
floor?
both. It starts here and then it jumps to the lower one.
Oh. I forgot about the crystal lizard entirely.
This is the first time we get introduced to those as well.
Was that it?
Which is,
Yeah.
yep. And it's, when you look at the crystal lizards, it's quite simply a hunk of flesh with a crystal on it that's developed, sort of seems to be regrowing.
It's also
not-
interesting. Sorry.
Go ahead.
That crystal lizard design is pretty similar to one of the designs of the enemies in Dark Souls 3 in Archdragon Peak. The little roly lizard dudes that spit fire.
Yes. True.
One could imagine that they were maybe a species that is being modified to grow these crystals, hypothetically.
Or the crystals are being used to grow the creatures. Yeah, could be both. Or they're at least in the same school of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way.
This is another setup that is echoed in Bloodborne. There's a bit entering the Yahargul Unseen Village where you will face two gunmen. You will face this big executioner, but behind you will be two gunmen if you go a certain path who will be shooting at you in the back. It's an interesting trap that you will likely miss your first time through, but one of the interesting, I keep saying interesting, I need to use a different word. One of the interpretations you could have for it is that the Taurus demon could be trying to enter this, and they could be shooting the Taurus demon from their posts, and we're just kind of like intruding on a battle that is between two forces.
They seem to be holding him off.
Mm-hmm.
The undead merchant makes a point of it that there's the Taurus demon is here killing undead, and the Capra demon went to the lower section of the town to do it too. But here's our Taurus with the axe, which, when you read the item description, mentions that it's one of the most powerful weapons in the world.
Mm-hmm. I do not care for the camera in this fight. I would really like it if I could get the thing where he backs. If you place it right, he'll backdash right off of that pit hole right there, and it's so funny. This is another example of just rolling between the legs, kind of like breaking AI.
That like,
oh,
oh,
that would be the example.
Just like, you want to make me go out of the hole, you go out of the
Exactly. It's sort of like this is an older variant of the demons who don't have that, who have that susceptibility, and it's kind of from a sort of evolutionary perspective, having that big midsection makes you clumsier. So this one is a lot more agile than the one we fought in the Undead Asylum.
It's sort of a trade-off between more strength or more durability for agileness and being able to move quickly.
Yeah. One of the other
is
interesting...
actually a real thing, because the bigger you get as a creature, the longer it would take for your brain to send signals down your limbs to do things. So you would indeed get clumsier by being bigger.
And one of the other interesting design features is that these spiral staircases were used in a lot of ancient or medieval style castle constructions, because it would make it easier for the people on top of the castle to attack downwards than people on the bottom, who would be constantly having their sword hand hitting the wall as they go up.
Yep. It's also really obvious when you go back down the aqueduct. If
Are
you
you-
were walking back outside of the aqueduct, going back to Firelink, you also will hit the wall every time with your sword, like you just did.
Right. And it's such a cool little structural thing to include, that real life detail of how an area was designed in order to have that in mind. Right. So I should focus on getting to this next section rather than talking for a little bit. Do you have anything you'd want to monologue for?
Hang on, let me think for a second. So the Undead Burg, I think that this might be where the people came from New Londo when they decided to flood the city. I think that's when they built the Undead Burg, and that's the people who moved into it. They probably did it just to have some place to live and not, well, have to stay in the cursed city full of ghosts.
Why is
And
that?
they seem to be moving up more and more on the mountain as well, gradually. By the time we arrive here in Dark Souls 3, the entire settlement seems to be on top of the wall rather than climbing up.
So
Over the ages,
you're
they seem
making
to have just
the case
built
that
up.
you're making the case that this is what eventually becomes the High Wall of Lothric explicitly.
No, that these people climbed the high wall of Lothric, shall we say. Is a better way of putting it, and this would be the foundation of everything that we see when we are up there. There's like how to put it. It's not the same buildings exactly. It's more that these things became the things supporting the new buildings. Like they just kept building upwards.
It's interesting to me how furry this appears.
Yeah.
Very bestial, honestly. There's sort of an element of Bloodborne in it, which makes also worth pointing out that its entry kind of resembles the cleric beast.
Over the wall at you. It's also interesting how he has that sort of like shovel move with his axe, almost like he's digging. Considering that they came from underneath the ground and they had to break out of a jail to come back out here. Do it.
One of the other things these older bosses have trouble with are just dead zones like that.
Yes.
Waylog, I think, is a big example of one that can kind of be trivialized if you can just get into that dead zone. And it's something that they got a lot better at as the years progressed. I think when you see things like them having hitboxes on just the stomping of the Taurus demon, that is part of their attempts to try to minimize those dead zones, but they still hadn't figured out quite how to do it at this point. All right.
And so the inspiration for the Taurus seems to be the Minotaur Spectre, who I have a picture up right now.
There we go.
That's the armor without the Spectre in it, and then when we actually look at it with the Spectre, he receives a massive axe, which is then proclaimed to be one of the most powerful weapons in the world of Saints. Like, there's not really many weapons that can challenge it in its ability to cause damage.
Okay. And what series was the Minotaur Saint from? Or the Taurus Saint?
He's from Hades. He's a Spectre, so he's underworld related. And I'm
But
going to make...
Was he Lost Canvas, or was he earlier than that?
He appears in both.
Okay. All right.
While he might be Hades related, I'm going to make the argument that there's a sort of dividing line, and a section of that was used for Izalith, as she lives on the edge of the Hades kingdom. And then we start going more into the Hades personal faction when we get to other characters. There seems to be a line. And here he is, the hero of all the games.
Okay. That's an interpretation. We discussed that we were going to stop at Taurus Night, so we could pick up at Solaire next time. Would that be minimal?
Yes. That's a
Alright.
good idea.
So Solaire, you'll just have
So-
to wait for us, buddy.
Keep staring at the sun.
You do your thing. Anyway, that was our first episode. We'll come back next time with Solaire and the Undead Parish. I think that will
Bye,
probably
everyone.
be next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. Bye, everybody.
Yes. Have a good day.